ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our weekly session. Sorry we could not have it last week because of some unavoidable circumstances. But now we will continue on the remaining part of chapter 2, that is from verse number 65 to 72. Just to recall that these verses are in a response from a question from Arjuna. Arjuna asked Krishna that uh, tell me the characteristics of the person who is well established in his intellect and his intellect has been stabilized. So he is answering to Arjuna in these verses. So in the verse number 62 and 63, he very clearly gave a fundamental, explanation of the functioning of inner instruments of human being. So there he very clearly said that when you are thinking of certain, desires, विषयों के चिंतन करते हो, तो उन विषयों में आपकी आसक्ति हो जाती है. So when you are thinking of certain desires and certain expectations, then you get attached to them. और उसमें अगर बाधा पड़ती है उनको होने में, तो आपको फिर क्रोध आता है. और जब क्रोध आता है तो आपकी उन विषयों को प्राप्ति का जो अटैचमेंट है वो और ज्यादा बढ़ जाता है. उसमें बहुत ज्यादा उसमें आपका अटैचमेंट बढ़ जाता है. एक चैलेंज आपके सामने बन जाता है वो. And once that happens, then you lose all your intellectual faculties, because you lose your memory and the power of rationality, that vivek, वो खो जाता है. And then you become unstable completely. And then he continues in verse number 64 that if you are able to exercise control over your sense organs and your desires, then all these instabilities, they disappear and you have an eternal happiness inside you. That is where he ended, that अंतःकरण की प्रसन्नता आपको मिल जाती है. Now we go to verse number 65. In verse number 65, he uses a term called sarv dukhanam hani. I'll read out the Hindi version of the verse. अंतःकरण की प्रसन्नता होने पर इसके संपूर्ण दुखों का अभाव हो जाता है और उस प्रसन्न चित्त वाले कर्मयोगी की बुद्धि शीघ्र ही सब ओर से हटकर एक परमात्मा में भली भांति स्थिर हो जाती है. So once you have been able to attain the internal peace after exercising due control over your senses and the desires, then that peace which you attain is instrumental in establishing your undiluted attention in the Almighty, and that gives you eternal peace. This is how he says here, sarva dukhanam hani, that all the distresses, they all disappear, because the root cause of distress is that some of your desires which you want to attain have not been fulfilled, or some of your expectations have not come true, and that is why it becomes the root cause of your distress. So here he says, सर्व दुखानाम हानि. जब आपको प्रसन्नता मिलती है, आपका इंद्रियों पे नियंत्रण हो जाता है, आपका विषयों पे कंट्रोल हो जाता है, तो उसके बाद आप जो हैं सब दुखों से निवृत्त हो जाते हैं. एंड देन योर बुद्धि is completely established in the Almighty without any dilution. So this is what he says here. This actually means that from bhog you become yogi. From bhogi you become yogi. This is what I would say from verse number 62 to verse number 65. He explains that how you can become yogi from bhogi. Then we will go to verse number 66. न जीते हुए मन और इंद्रियों वाले पुरुष में निश्चयात्मक बुद्धि नहीं होती, और उस अयुक्त मनुष्य के अंतःकरण में भावना भी नहीं होती, तथा भावनाहीन मनुष्य को शांति नहीं मिलती, और शांतिहीन मनुष्य को सुख कैसे मिल सकता है. Now this is another explanation of the functioning of the inner instruments of human being. The one functioning was explained in verse number 62 and 63 and 64, and now he is explaining another reality of our inner instrument, that if we do not have peace inside, then you cannot have sukham, you cannot have what you call eternal happiness. Eternal happiness is possible only when you have peace inside. That is another reality. And when you have asthir buddhi, when your buddhi is deviating and all the time moving in one direction or the other, in that situation the buddhi is not sthir. If the buddhi is not sthir, then you cannot have shanti. वो शांति नहीं होगी तो आपको सुख नहीं मिलेगा. ये अशांतस्य कुतः सुखम, बिना शांति के सुख संभव नहीं है. ये बड़ा क्लियरली उन्होंने इस पे कह दिया है. तो ये जो वर्स नंबर 62 से वर्स नंबर 66 तक ये बड़ा क्लियर उन्होंने एक लेसन हमको दिया है, that we should follow this practice and then we can reach the path of yoga. Now the next verse is 67. This is a very beautiful verse once again. क्योंकि जैसे जल में चलने वाली नाव को वायु हर लेती है, वैसे ही विषयों में विचरती हुई इंद्रियों में से मन किसी एक इंद्रिय के साथ भी रहता है तो उस अयुक्त पुरुष की वो मन जो है उसको इंद्रिय के साथ ले चला जाता है और उसकी बुद्धि जो है अस्थिर हो जाती है. नाउ दिस इज ए वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जाम्पल. जल जो है अस्थिर होता है, जल स्थिर नहीं होता. जल इज द वाटर इज कीप मूविंग इन द रिवर, एंड इफ द नाव इज सिटिंग ऑन द वाटर, obviously similarly if we are sitting in what we call इंद्रियों की जो सुख है, जो वासना है, इंद्रियों की जो विषय हैं, अगर उनके ऊपर आप बैठे हैं तो वो विषय तो अस्थिर होते हैं. दे आर नॉट स्टेबलाइज्ड, दे कीप चेंजिंग, दे कीप मूविंग. तो वो जल की तरह से हैं. सो वन ऑफ द सेंसेज विल बी टेकन बाय दैट वासना, and then the man goes with that vasana, and then your intellect becomes destabilized. So it is the example that as the water is unstable and the nav sitting on the water remains unstable, and with the wind it can be taken in any direction. Similarly, when we are sitting on the net of vasanas, और जो इंद्रियों के जो विषय हैं उनके ऊपर अगर हम बैठे हुए हैं जो अस्थिर हैं, तो जो मन जो है वो उस आपको किसी भी डायरेक्शन में ले जाता है. वो इंद्री जो है वो वासना में लिप्त हो जाती है और मन उसके साथ, आप वैसे मन आपको कहीं भी ले जाता है और फिर आप अस्थिर अवस्था में पहुंच जाते हैं. तो ये बहुत अच्छा उदाहरण श्री कृष्ण ने दिया है यहाँ पे कि जैसे अस्थिर जल के अंदर नाव को वायु हरण कर लेती है, उसी तरह से अस्थिर वासनाओं में बैठे हुए व्यक्ति की इंद्रियों को मन हरण कर ले जाता है, और उस हरण करने के बाद उसकी बुद्धि जो है अस्थिर हो जाती है. ये अगर हम प्रैक्टिकल रूप से देखेंगे तो आपको पता लगेगा। मैंने कई बार अपने खुद के व्यवहार को एनालाइज किया है, मैंने पाया है कि जब आप किसी इंद्रिय के उसमें लगे हुए हैं विषय में, तो वो विषय आपको इधर से ऊपर से नीचे विचलित करते रहते हैं और उसके साथ आपका मन चला जाता है और मन से फिर आपकी जो रैशनैलिटी है, विवेक है, वो खत्म हो जाता है। तो ये चीजें हमें अपने व्यवहार को समझकर, अपने किसी प्रैक्टिकल एग्जाम्पल को जीवन में लेके उसको समझना चाहिए, तो ये बहुत अच्छी तरह से हमें समझ में आएगी। तो मैं चाहूंगा कि आई थिंक ईच वन ऑफ अस शुड टेक एन एग्जाम्पल इन आवर लाइफ, हाउ आवर the desires of our senses keep our senses destabilized, and then the mind takes them away, and then we lose the what we call the intellect, which is required to stabilize our thinking. So this is how actually this happens. So this is all very deep psychological explanation of the functioning of the inner instruments of human being, starting from verse number 62 till now and further down. Then we'll take verse number 68. इसलिए हे महाभाव, जिस पुरुष की इंद्रियां जिस पुरुष की इंद्रियां इंद्रियों के विषय से सब प्रकार से निग्रह हो चुकी हैं, उसी की बुद्धि स्थिर है। इंद्रियां जो हैं विषयों से निग्रह होना चाहिए, उनका संबंध टूट जाना चाहिए विषयों से। इंद्रियां और विषयों का संबंध जब तक बना रहेगा, तब तक वो इंद्रियां भी अस्थिर रहेंगी और बुद्धि जो है वो अस्थिर इंद्रियों को अपने साथ लेके चली जाएगी। इसलिए हमें चाहिए कि हमारे इंद्रियों के और विषयों का जो संबंध है उसको किसी तरह से हम तोड़ दें। उसको तोड़ने से इंद्रियां स्वतंत्र हो जाएंगी, विषयों पे आश्रित नहीं होंगी, और स्वतंत्र इंद्रियां जो हैं वो उसकी वजह से मन स्वतंत्र रहेगा और फिर विवेक आपका पूरी तरह से काम करेगा। तो ये एक इंटरनल इंस्ट्रूमेंट के फंक्शनिंग की जो है वो प्रक्रिया है जिसको हमें जानना चाहिए। नाउ द नेक्स्ट वर्स इज something which is not easy to understand, and there are many meanings of that verse, but we will try to understand that verse, how it works. Verse number 69, संपूर्ण प्राणियों के लिए जो रात्रि के समान है, उस नित्य ज्ञान स्वरूप परमानंद की प्राप्ति में स्थित प्रज्ञ योगी जागता है, और जिस नासवान सांसारिक सुख की प्राप्ति में सब प्राणी जागते हैं, परमात्मा के तत्व को जानने वाले मुनि के लिए वह रात्रि के समान है। Now this is not exactly the meaning of the Sanskrit verse, what I have read out to you. This is not exact meaning. This is one of the meanings. I'll read the Sanskrit verse. Ya nisa sarvbhutanam tashyam jagrati sanyami yashyam jagrati bhutani sa nisa pashyato mune. The Sanskrit verse has many meanings. Some people call it, this is one of the Mahavakya of Bhagavad Gita. One meaning is this very clear, that when all the normal human beings are engaged in this world, are engaged in bhog, are engaged in what you call attaining certain, desires or satisfying different desires, at that moment is like nisha, that is like ratri for a muni. He does not give attention to that. But when the people are taking complete rest, when they are completely detached from this world, in the sleep we are detached from this world, that situation is like awakening for a muni. That is the situation which we should. This is one of the meanings of this. Now, this has paradox. First paradox is that awakening is what and sleep is what. So those who are in sleep, that sleep for ordinary people is engaging into the activities of the world to satisfy your desire. That is considered as sleep by a person who is awakened, who is enlightened. For him, this is like a sleep. For him, when the people are sleeping, completely disengaged from the activities of the world, from the desires of the world, they are taking physical rest in the night, disengaged from the world. That state is the state of awakening for a person who is enlightened. So, this is one meaning which is very, very clear. The second meaning is much deeper than this. The second meaning is verbal translation of this Sanskrit word. When we are, for a person who is living in his soul and not in body, for that person, when the body sleeps, he is still awake. When his body is at rest, he is not sleeping. His inner instrument, the soul, is still awake. It is said about Buddha that when he used to sleep, his body used to sleep, not he himself. He himself used to remain awake. That is what was told by Ananda, who all the time lived with Buddha. And Buddha, it is said that he never even changed his karvat in the night. The way he slept once, he slept that way because internally he was awake. His body slept, not he. So that is another profound meaning, that those people who are awakened, those people who are enlightened from inside, for them, they do not sleep when their body sleeps. Body is taking rest, body is separate, but I am separate. I am all the time awake. So that is another meaning when we talk about the meaning of this verse. Then the third meaning of this verse is bondage and freedom. When we are engaged in this world, in, in the process of satisfying our desires one after another, in that process of satisfying our desires, that is a process of bondage. Because as soon as you do activities which are designed to satisfy your desires, it means आप पराश्रित हैं. You are dependent on the pleasures of the outside world for your own happiness. आप स्वाधीन नहीं हैं, आप पराधीन हैं. As soon as those, desires stop fulfilling from outside world, you will become distressed. You will get into distress. So this is what we call basically bondage. Bondage with the outside world. So when we are in bondage with the outside world, when we are looking for our happiness in the objects outside in the world, that is called Nisha for ordinary people. That is called Ratri. And a wise person, an enlightened person, is awake. He is not engaged into that Ratri. In that situation of bondage, he is awake. He keeps himself away from that process. So that is the other meaning of this. But when a person who is not in the state of bondage, who is not dependent for his happiness from the outside objects, from the outside world, then he is swadhin. He is not dependent on others. That is the real meaning of swadhin or liberation. In that state, this enlightened person considers the day, not the night. He considers it as day. When it is night for us, because we are free from bondage only when in the night when we sleep. Rest of the time when we are awake, we are all the time in bondage of this world. And that is the meaning, the third meaning of this verse. So this verse basically, I've told you before also that I'm not an expert in Sanskrit and nor am I expert in Bhagavad Gita, but this is what I have understood myself uh, through various readings and through my own interpretation of Sanskrit, that this verse tells you a paradoxical situation between ordinary human beings who remain engaged in the world and the enlightened people who are awake and who do not engage in the activities of this world for their own happiness. Because for them, as he mentioned in one of the verses before, आत्मा से आत्मा की संतुष्टि आती है, that you are satisfied within your own self. You are not looking for outside objects for your happiness, and therefore you are not paradhin. But if you are looking for happiness outside, obviously you are subject to those objects, and therefore you are not independent. You are actually dependent on outside world. So जब आत्मा से आत्मा की संतुष्टि हो जाती है, then you are completely liberated. Then the outside objects of this world do not impact on you. Whatever is happening outside, you consider that as Leela. You consider that as a play. For example, a lot of things. Now look at the world outside. There's a war in Ukraine. People are worried what will happen. And there are sometimes communal riots here and there. There are crimes here and there. There are people who are dying of hunger. There are people who are having tremendous amount of wealth and misusing their wealth. There are dangers of climate change. People are talking about those dangers. And you go somewhere else, some family is worried about the education of their children. Somebody else is worried about the marriage of their daughter. So there are thousands and thousands of activities are taking place in this world all around us. If we remain, you know, unimpacted, if we are not impacted by those events, then we are swadhin. If those events are impacting on us and they are making us, happy and unhappy, then that event is actually becoming a source of your paradhinta, becoming a source of your dependence. Like I was thinking yesterday, for a few minutes I saw this IPL match of one of the teams. Now I was thinking that if a person is completely detached from any team, then you enjoy all the good shots. Whoever is playing doesn't matter. If it's good shots, you enjoy it, irrespective of who is playing. But if you are attached to a particular team, for example, if I am attached to Rajasthan Royal and the players of the team are not playing well, then I will feel very unhappy. If they are playing very good, I'll feel very happy. If the team opposite to Rajasthan Royal is playing very good, I will be unhappy. And when they are playing bad, I'll be happy. So I will be impacted because I'm attached to a particular team now. If I'm not attached, then I will not be impacted. Similarly, we should not get attached to the activities of the world. The world has its own movement. Things keep going. समष्टि की एक वो है गति है, वो चलती रहती है. इसीलिए इसको संसार को जगत कहते हैं, क्योंकि इसकी एक अपनी गति है, वो चलती रहती है. सो उस समष्टि की गति को हम अपने से अलग करके देखें, उसको एक खेल के रूप में देखें, that this is like a play which is going on outside, then we will not be impacted and we will not get the so-called pleasure and so-called pain with every pendulum swinging from here to there. Otherwise, with the pendulum swinging, our heartbeats will also keep changing. And then we will feel happy, unhappy, angry and disappointed. All kinds of things will happen. But if we can remain detached from that process, then none of these will happen. You are established in yourself, and फिर you are looking for your happiness in your own self. आत्मा से आत्मा की संतुष्टि होगी, फिर आपको बाहर के ऑब्जेक्ट से नहीं, बाहर के ऑब्जेक्ट is a play which is going on. I think this is what we have to learn, and this is what will come in one of the verses now, next verse in fact. This is another very profound example Krishna has given. So let's go to verse number 60 now, because 69, sorry, verse number 70. Verse number 69 is one of the very profound verses in Bhagavad Gita. It actually explains the entire situation, that how you can, completely detach from this world, and how you can remain unaffected from the happenings outside. That is possible only when you detach from the activities of the world. It does not mean that you don't have to do those activities. That question will come in next chapter. You have to do those activities. You have to remain fully involved in those activities, but you are not getting impacted from those activities. That difference we will, understand in the next chapter. But right now, what we are understanding is that whatever is happening outside in the world is a play. Take it as a play. Don't take it to your soul, and don't allow your pendulum to swing from one side to another, from happiness to unhappiness, and from anger to disappointment. Don't allow that to happen. This is what Krishna is explaining from verse number 62 till now. Now let us go to verse number 70. This is another very profound example. जैसे नाना नदियों के जल सब ओर से परिपूर्ण अचल प्रतिष्ठा वाले समुद्र में उसको विचलित न करते हुए ही समा जाते हैं, वैसे ही सब भोग स्थित स्थित प्रज्ञ पुरुष में बिना कोई विकार उत्पन्न किए हुए समा जाते हैं. Now this is a fantastic explanation which we can see. Now you see the ocean has vast entity. Thousands and thousands of rivers come and get into the ocean. But ocean remains as it is. It has not changed. Its banks are not rising. There is no additional movement because of the river falling inside. They all just get into and they become part of the ocean. Similarly, we have a great ocean inside, the ocean of divinity, the ocean of Paramatma, which is running our this whole instrument. If we can realize that ocean, then all these things which I was just talking about, the sources of pain and pleasure in this world, my son is not getting a good job, or his marriage is not taking place, or my wife's health is not good, or there is a war in Ukraine, or there is this government is falling down, and there's a crisis in this community, and there's a communal right here, and all those things which are happening in the world. Firstly, you have no control over them. How much control can you have? You have no control. These are happenings which are outside your control. Secondly, if you start getting impacted by them, then you will be destroyed. You will never have peace inside. This is what happened to many people during coronavirus problem. The people sitting at home, they were feeling absolutely disoriented. And they felt that, this end of the world has come, and what will I do? They all the time saw the negative things outside. And that impacted them. People had neurological disorders because of that. People had trauma during that period. So all these things happened because we are dependent on the outside events for our happiness and unhappiness. So those events are happening. They will continue to happen. They are not going to stop. The rivers will continue to fall into the ocean, but ocean remains avichlit. It is it's not impacted. It remains stable as it has been. Similarly, all these events will keep happening, and we from inside should remain stable. We should not get the pressure. We should not succumb under the pressure of those events. They should not become the source of happiness and unhappiness, source of disappointment or source of anger for us. I think we should remain stable in that situation, because these events are firstly beyond our control. Secondly, we need not look for our happiness and unhappiness into these events. ये समष्टि की गति है, ये जगति है, ये चलता रहेगा, ये हमेशा होता आया है, हमेशा होता रहेगा। इस चीज को हमें पहचानना पड़ेगा कि ये एक शाश्वत सत्य है। इस संसार में ये दुख सुख के जो कारण हैं ये दिखाई पड़ते रहेंगे। ये ऐसा नहीं कि पहले नहीं था और आज है, ये सब गलत है, हमेशा थे। अगर आप महाभारत काल में भी देखें तो वहां भी ये दुख सुख के कारण सब थे। भाइयों में द्वेष था, सत्ता के लिए बहुत बड़ा वो था, एक होड़ थी, सत्ता प्राप्ति के लिए एक लालसा थी, और अस्त्रों की प्राप्ति के लिए लालसा थी, दूसरों के ऊपर नियंत्रण करने की लालसा थी। तो ये चीजें मनुष्य की प्रवृत्ति में हमेशा रही हैं, इसलिए इस जगत में ये चीजें चलती रहेंगी। ये एक शाश्वत सत्य है जो हमें स्वीकार कर लेना चाहिए, और उस सत्य से हमारी अंतर आत्मा की जो गति है उसको विचलित नहीं होना चाहिए। ये इस श्लोक का महत्व है कि हमारी अंतर आत्मा एक ओशन की तरह से है, उसमें ये सारी नदियां, जो सारी चीजें संसार में हो रही हैं, वो सारी आके समा जाती हैं, लेकिन हमें इम्पैक्ट नहीं करती। ये हो रही हैं, आप उनको देखेंगे, आप उनको सुनेंगे, टीवी भी देखेंगे, अखबार भी पढ़ेंगे, लोगों से बात करेंगे, सब चीजें आपके सामने आएंगी, आपको पता लगेगा, बट यू रिमेन एब्सोल्युटली स्टेबल. You are not vacillating because of that process. I think that is what we have to learn from these verses, that this world is a play. This has been going on, this will continue to remain in force like this, and we should not get impacted by that. So I think this is what I would like to say with verse number 70 here. Once you have done that, then you can attain what you call param shanti, the eternal peace. Or eternal peace means eternal happiness. That is what Krishna said before, कि बिना शांति के सुख कैसे हो सकता है, बिना शांति के अशांतस्य कुतः सुखम। जब जो आदमी अशांत होता है उसके लिए सुख आ ही नहीं सकता, जब शांति अंदर आ जाएगी तो सुख अपने आप आ जाएगा। दैट इज corollary, they go together. Once you have peace inside, you have attained happiness inside. So I think this is what we have to learn here, to detach ourselves from the happenings, from the world. It does not mean that you are not involved. You are part of that world and you are an actor in that world. You will continue to do all those things, but you are not allowing those things to go and impact you inside. That is what is important. So now we will take the last two verses of this chapter. Verse number 71. जो पुरुष संपूर्ण कामनाओं को त्याग कर ममता रहित, अहंकार रहित और स्पृहा रहित हुआ विचरता है। ममता रहित, अहंकार रहित, स्पृहा रहित। ये स्पृहा we also saw it earlier, मात्रा, स्पर्श, that is the same word, that जब बाहर के ऑब्जेक्ट्स आपके इंद्रियों को टच करते हैं, स्पर्श करते हैं, तो दुख सुख की आपको प्राप्ति होती है। तो ये यहाँ भी आ गया, निष्प्रह, आप उनको टच नहीं करने दें, आपको वो आएंगे, बट डोंट अलाउ देम टू इम्पैक्ट ऑन यू। सो कामना से रहित हो, ममता से रहित हो। आप कहेंगे कि आपके परिवार के प्रति आपकी ममता, नहीं, इसका अर्थ ये नहीं है। आपके परिवार के प्रति आपकी ममता रहेगी, आपके बच्चों के प्रति आपकी ममता रहेगी। इसका यह अर्थ यह है कि उनकी एक्टिविटी से आपको इनर पेन और प्लेजर नहीं होना चाहिए। आपकी जो अंतरात्मा है वो स्थिर रहनी चाहिए स्तंभ की तरह से। वो सब चीजें होंगी। आप संसार में ये सब चीजें करेंगे, अपने बच्चों का पालन पोषण भी करेंगे, अपने परिवार का देख रेख भी करेंगे, वो ममता होगी, वो होगा सब कुछ। यहाँ इस ममता का अर्थ वो नहीं है। यहाँ इस ममता का अर्थ ये है, और हमेशा कृष्ण की वाणी से यही कहा गया है कि ये जो इस तरह की आशा है, ममता है, अहंकार है, ये आपको स्पर्श नहीं करे अंदर से, ये निष्प्रह बन जाए, आपको अंदर से टच नहीं करे। ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट। तो ये चीज हमें सीखनी पड़ेगी कि हमारी अंतरात्मा को ये चीजें विचलित नहीं करें। ये चीजें आपको प्रैक्टिस में सब जगह करनी पड़ेंगी, क्योंकि आप बिना कर्म के कभी नहीं रह सकते। कर्म आपको करना है, आपकी जिम्मेदारियां आपको निभानी है, लेकिन ये चीजें आपको अंदर से विचलित नहीं करें, आप अंदर से निष्प्रह रहें इन चीजों से। सो दिस इज व्हाट ही इज सेइंग हियर। जो पुरुष संपूर्ण कामनाओं को त्याग कर, कामनाएं छोड़ दीजिए, कोई एक्सपेक्टेशन मत रखिए, जो होता है एक्सेप्ट कर लीजिए, कोई एक्सपेक्टेशन नहीं कि मेरी टीम जीतेगी हारेगी, छोड़ दीजिए। आपका उस पर कोई निमंत्रण नहीं है, नियंत्रण नहीं है, आप बैठे रहिए, जैसा आता है उसको आप स्वीकार करिए। मेरा बेटा मेरी आज्ञा मानेगा या नहीं मानेगा, उसके ऊपर आपका नियंत्रण नहीं है, आप जो होता है उसको स्वीकार कर लीजिए। उसको अच्छा जॉब मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा, आपको उसके ऊपर कोई नियंत्रण नहीं है, इसलिए जो होता है उसको आप एक्सेप्ट कर लीजिए। आप अपनी तरफ से कोशिश पूरी करिए, लेकिन जो रिजल्ट जो आता है वो आपको पूरे आदर के साथ स्वीकार करना चाहिए, ये जरूरी है। तो संपूर्ण कामनाओं को त्याग कर, ममता रहित, अहंकार रहित। अहंकार एक बहुत जबरदस्त बाधा बनता है उसमें। जो अहंकार से आदमी को क्या है, इसमें लिखा है निर्ममो निरहंकार है। अहंकार संसार में सबसे बड़ा विघ्न है मनुष्य की शांति के लिए, क्योंकि अहंकार एक चैलेंज क्रिएट करता है आपके अंदर कि ये मैं क्यों नहीं कर सकता, ये मेरे मेरे साथ ऐसा व्यवहार क्यों हुआ, मेरे को इन्होंने ये गाली क्यों दे दी, मेरे को इन्होंने ये प्रमोशन क्यों नहीं दिया, मेरे को मेरे बेटे ने मेरी आज्ञा क्यों नहीं मानी, मेरी पत्नी ने मेरी आज्ञा क्यों नहीं मानी, मेरे छोटे भाई ने मैंने जैसे कहा वैसा क्यों नहीं किया। ये सब चीजें अहंकार से आती। द इनर ईगो क्रिएट्स दिस, कि मैं देश का प्रधानमंत्री हूं, मेरी सब चीजें मेरे कहने से क्यों नहीं चलती हैं, वो ईगो आता है। तो वो अहंकार से जो है जब पूर्ति नहीं होती है तो यू आर deeply hurt, and that again becomes a vacillation of your pendulum inside. When you are hurt, then obviously you are disappointed or you are angry, and then the whole process which Krishna said in verse number 62-63, that starts, and then you are not in a position to control yourself. So this is what we have to understand. कामनाओं को त्याग कर, ममता रहित, अहंकार रहित और स्पृहा रहित, ये सब चीजें आपको टच नहीं करनी चाहिए। अंदर अंदर जो आपका जो इनर सोल है, जो आपका अंदर का प्रकाश है, उसको ये चीजें विचलित नहीं करें। यह है निष्प्रह। निष्प्रह का मतलब यही है यहाँ पे, निष्प्रह, निर्ममो, निरंकार है, ये सब चीजें उसमें। तो उसके आपको फिर शांति अंदर से प्राप्त होगी। यू विल रिमेन एब्सोल्युटली इन ए स्टेट ऑफ समाधि। समाधि उसी चीज को कहते हैं, जब आप ये सब चीजें प्राप्त कर लेते हैं तो आपको अंदर की शांति प्राप्त होगी। जब आपको अंदर की शांति प्राप्त होगी तो आपको सुखी सुख है, फिर आपको दुखी कोई कर ही नहीं सकता। ये इसका अर्थ है वर्स नंबर 71। Now let's go to the last verse of this wonderful chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 72. हे अर्जुन, इस ब्रह्म को प्राप्त हुए पुरुष की स्थिति। हे अर्जुन, यह ब्रह्म को प्राप्त हुए पुरुष की स्थिति है। देखिए अब आप, he is saying कि once you have attained these things, then you are one with the Almighty, one with the Brahman, one with the Supreme. इसको प्राप्त होकर योगी कभी मोहित नहीं होता, और अंत काल में भी ब्राह्मी स्थिति में स्थित होकर ब्रह्मानंद को प्राप्त हो जाता है। सो वंस वी कैन डू दिस, कामनाओं को त्याग कर, ममता को छोड़कर, अहंकार को छोड़कर, जो मात्रा स्पर्श है उसको कंप्लीटली छोड़ दिया, और आपका अंदर का जो inner soul hai, that remains intact and is not vacillating with the activities outside, then you are in a state where you are one with the Brahma, one with the Almighty. ये ब्राह्मी स्थिति कह दो, समाधि की स्थिति कह दो, इसको पूर्ण लिबरेशन की स्थिति कह दो, इसको पूर्ण स्वतंत्रता की स्थिति कह दो, स्वाधीनता की स्थिति कह दो, दैट इज दैट स्टेट। योगी कह दो, आप योगी की स्थिति कह दो, कुछ भी नाम इसको दे सकते हैं आप, बट दैट इज द स्टेट वेयर यू आर कंप्लीटली इंडिपेंडेंट, completely liberated from the happenings outside in the world. Those happenings outside do not impact your inner soul. But as I explained to you, it does not mean that you remain indifferent to those happenings. You are a participant in this world. You have to play your role. Your role is as a person, an actor plays a role on the theater of a particular character. Similarly, we are playing this role here, but we do not become that character. जैसे रामलीला में कोई राम का रोल अदा कर रहा है तो वो राम नहीं बन जाता. As soon as the theater is over, he is the same human being as he was before. He is an ordinary human being. Similarly, we play this role here as we play in the theater, but we remain intact inside that, eternal soul which is unimpacted by anything else. अब जैसे बहुत से लोग एक्टर एक्ट्रेस प्ले करते हैं and then they remain in that intoxicated situation that I was that and I played this, then they are impacted by that role. Then they cannot be independent, then they cannot be happy because that role will continue to haunt them. And that is what is happening to us. We remain impacted by that role. Whatever role we are playing, we are completely attached to that, and that is the problem. That attachment is the problem. Doing it with perfection is not a problem. Do it with your all faculties, do it in your best way, but without attachment. So this is what संपूर्ण कामनाओं को त्याग कर ममता रहित, अहंकार रहित, स्पृहा रहित हुआ, निस्पृह निर्ममो निरंकारो, then you will attain what we call शांतिम गच्छति, तब आपको शांति प्राप्त होगी उसमें पूरी की पूरी. So this is what the state of a person who is one with the Almighty. That is how he has concluded this chapter. And this is, as we said, this was the chapter called Sankhya Yoga, based primarily on the Sankhya philosophy. But this is the what we call the highest form of knowledge which can be available anywhere in the world. This chapter gives us the highest state of knowledge, the highest science of knowledge, the perfect knowledge which anybody can have anywhere is in this chapter. Starting from कि आत्मा अजर है, अमर है, हम जैसे कपड़े बदलते हैं वैसे शरीर को बदल देते हैं, आत्मा वैसे की वैसे रह जाती है. And then he talks about many things, and at the end he talks when Arjuna asks him कि स्थित प्रज्ञा आदमी कैसे बैठता है, कैसे उठता है, किस तरह का उसका व्यवहार है, then he explains all that in the last part of this chapter. So I think we have in fact that in terms of knowledge, this is the most profound knowledge you can find anywhere in the world. In any what you call religious book, any scientific book, any book of any other nature. So I think if we can understand this chapter well, and we try to detach ourselves with the happenings in the world, and we consider this world as a play, as a theater, where we are playing our role, others are playing their role, things are not under our control, they need not affect our inner self, then we will be in a state of completely what we call Brahmi Sthiti. We will be in a state where we will be at peace with ourselves, and that also means that we will be totally happy with ourselves. Then we are not looking for happiness outside. वो आत्मा से आत्मा में संतुष्टि मिलेगी, और उसी से आपको पूरी शांति मिलेगी, और शांति से आपको सुख मिलेगा, and you will be eternally in happiness. So I would like to conclude this chapter today, and I would like to thank all of you profoundly for listening to me patiently and making all the arrangements, particularly Rajesh, for all this, the wonderful rendering of Bhagavad Gita chapter number 2. And we will continue next week on our next chapter, chapter number 3. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I have a few minutes because I have to leave around 11 for this meeting, as I mentioned to you.